It's been dodgy again for some reason. Come on.
There we go.
Hi.
So this is I'm still thinking about titles. I think the film's going to need like a proper title, but the general gist of it is it's about these two people I know called John and Lisa Mosey, and they about their story. So can you move on?
Yeah.
So they lost their daughter in the Lockerbie disaster, which just some facts about it there. But I don't really want to focus on the actual disaster. I want to look at what's come from it and how they've coped with the disaster. So, this is quite an old photo. Like Marcus, who's their son, who's still alive. He's about 16 now. He's now about 40. So the disaster, I think it was 26 years ago, it actually happened. And they say that they quite relied on their Christian faith. And there was actually, yesterday, there was a documentary also about the disaster. And the NH17 flight that went down recently, they brought some of the victims from that, like the family of the victims. They brought them to Lockerbie, and they went to Lockerbie. And they're kind of talking about how they've coped with it, like 26 years on. And one thing, because when something bad happens, like the media is always like straight there. And one thing that happened early on is that they did an interview with, I think it was the BBC or ITV or someone, and they said, because they were talking about their Christian faith, and they were saying, the reporter was like, haven't you lost your faith because of this? And how can you forgive these people? And they said, unforgiveness is not an option, because if you don't forgive them, then how can you move on yourself? Next slide, please. So it's obviously a fairly poignant story, and one thing I think will be quite interesting is not focusing on like the actual interview, because just the talking head or two talking heads on the screen is quite boring. So I think it just also because they've done documentaries before and they've like spoken at churches and other institutions across the UK. They might have like a sequence that they get into themselves. So I want to kind of take them out of that and conduct audio interviews, so it's more like personal. Then I can cut up your audio interviews in GarageBand or Audacity and pick bits that I want to use. Now, then the actual film itself, it will be mostly B-roll, so just them, shot on cooking, eating dinner. And they have grandchildren now through their son, and they're very lively and two nice little boys. I think some shots of them playing and stuff, if they're alright with that, I think that would be quite interesting to have, just to show that like life goes on when these sort of things happen. Just a bit more, I should have said that, move on over there. And then, so why do I want to do it like this? Because like I've said, there was one on yesterday, and there's been several. If you go on YouTube, you'll now type in Lockerbie documentary, you'll see, like 5 to 6 there, it's like an hour anyway. So I want to do something that's different, so like something more personal to them, like individually, and how they. I want to focus on the faith issue as well, rather than a disaster. And a good question, because I was actually speaking to them yesterday, and they said they're happy to do the film. And we were kind of thinking about titles and stuff, and this was one that I'd already thought of that kind of fits for Where is God in Bad Times. Next slide, please. So, as I was saying earlier, don't want to focus on the disaster, because the disaster, it's been done before, you see it. And also that helps with like copywriting issues. Screen's dead, I'll let you go.
Come back.
There we go. Because obviously all these other documentaries and clips of because I think it was the Americans, and they did like a test with it, and they actually blew a plane with the bomb just so they could visualise what it's like. I know quite a few documentaries have used that footage. I don't want to use any of that, and then there's no copywriting issues either. So next slide, please. So the logistics, it's a fairly simple cast. Obviously, you've got John and Lisa, who's going to focus on. It might be interesting to do an interview with their son as well. who's called Marcus, and I think it'd be quite interesting to hear his viewpoint as well, because it's not a very large production, like the actual scale of it, so you wouldn't need too many people to actually put it off. It's doing it right that's going to be the hard part, and so you just need like 1 or 2 cameras, and you need an audio recorder and a director. So realistically, you could do it with 2 people. Next slide, please. So I should have a little think about equipment. The V1s, because it's a documentary, I think, and I'm happy with those sorts of cameras rather than the SLRs. I think it'd be good to use them. And they record onto a mini DV tape. And also, I've been taught, and I know that it never get 1 audio source, always get at least 2. So I'd like to have like lapel mics on them. I'd also like to have like a boom mic on them, even if it's just like mounted on a tripod and pointed towards them. Then you've got 2 audio sources to play with. Next slide. So the pros and cons, like this is something I've been thinking about quite a lot because it's important. I'm not going to read them out because they're there, but the main thing, my issue with it is, does it really show my strengths as a filmmaker? Because my main areas that I've found so far is more in the audio field, like putting together soundtracks and audio effects and stuff like that. It's like, because it's more a documentary and more that kind of style, will I be able to, I won't really be able to use those kind of things as much. Obviously, you're still going to have audio tracks in the background, and that stuff's still important, and that's going to be part of getting it right, but that's kind of my concern. Also,
Sorry, do you want to go back?
no time. Also, because all the equipment and stuff, and most people, because I think we're going to be using other people in the class as like crew members. I live in Lancaster, and so do they, so it's going to be quite hard to. It's like a £10 return bus fare to get people there and back again. So the budget, as I said, the transport cost is the main thing really. So I probably need to set aside about 50 odd quid just for for the transport. And then the equipment, I have a boom mic myself, and I have the lapel mics and an audio recorder. So there's not necessarily all that much equipment that I need from college. It's mostly just the cameras. So yeah, because it's all there, I don't need it. So Dom asked us to think about a release. Obviously, because I have a YouTube channel, I have Vimeo, it'd be good to put it on there, share it about on Facebook if they're happy with it, and putting those things out there, and then it gets shared. And I think it's quite a powerful story as well as poignant, and the more people who see it, the better. And but I think it would also be quite good to get maybe a DVD release as well, or just like a small scale one, because I think there's quite a few people who'd be interested in just buying a little DVD of it. Next slide. There's not many more. Any questions on that?
Cool. Nice presentation.
Very good. Yeah, well done. Okay, so it's about faith.
Yeah.
Is it about? Is it very much just a straight documentary that paints a picture of a situation, or is it kind of trying to bring people round to looking at faith as an option?
I think kind of both. I think I want to film it as the kind of style that where it's just looking at what happened and how faith's gone through. But when I was speaking to him yesterday, he said, actually for me, he said, we're going to see, because they recognise that good things have come out of it. Obviously, they like give anything to have their thoughts about, but they do recognise that good things have come out of it. And then one of the things he was saying was that actually lots of people have come to faith because of it, and he said that's the biggest benefit for him. So I think there does need to be a bit of that in there as well.
Do they live in?
No, they live in Lancaster.
Alright, that's where that's handy.
Yeah. I could walk up there in about 20 minutes, so for me it's
Right, that's
very
good. So
easy.
you don't have to travel to look at well,
Yeah.
unless you want to get shots of the site,
Yeah.
which is just on the motorway. It's not a very interesting site, but it might be an interesting way of opening your film.
Yeah,
The ordinariness of the location where the plane came down.
yeah,
It's a motorway with fields, and there's pretty much nothing there apart from Lockerbie, which is nearby.
Yeah.
But I actually, around that time, I was driving up is it the M74? Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, up to Glasgow, so I was working up there. And it was after, and there was part of the embankment by the motorway was scorched. And it was for quite a long time where part of the plane had hit and fuel. And so obviously that's not there anymore, but I just wonder whether it's worth a little trip up to the site just to show how boring the landscape is there. That it's a motorway and some fields, and this is where people died, you know.
And how much we've moved on as well, how long ago it is, and the big emphasis is on, we're not focusing on that horrific event, we're focusing on life afterwards.
Yeah.
So that, I think, demonstrates life afterwards quite nicely. There's nothing left there. There's no wreckage, there's no holes, there's no, you know, everything's changed, and it's quite important.
Yeah. Maybe it would be that actually add extra cost in, but it might be worth it with them just have a look. Yeah.
I think it's a way of avoiding, as you said, you know, not wanting to use newsreel footage of the actual the crash and do what other people have done. But I think it's to set the tone and the geography for people, because a lot of people who see this won't really know much about it.
Yeah.
Remember that you're also making it for an audience who may not know anything about the Lockerbie disaster and what happened and why it happened, and you know. So to get everything into context very, very early on to introduce your film, it might be worth having, you know, some shots of Lockerbie town, how ordinary it is, how boring it is. The motorway with the embankments where parts of the plane actually came onto it, and just these very ordinary shots of semi-rural England where horrendous
also
thing.
help with length as well, because there's only so much B-roll, like the daily lives that you can do.
Exactly. You're going to need a lot of footage. It depends on how long the film is, but in order to contextualise, introduce your story, because you really need to be very clear in your introduction about what happened, why it happened, and then you move on with their story.
Yeah.
Otherwise, somebody just watching it who didn't know anything about it, you have to put yourself in their shoes and say, well, will they understand what they're watching? You know, so you need a very strong introduction to these people's story.
But maybe rather than like going straight to them, maybe just like taking someone like the actor or something like as a presenter or something, and just like give a little introduction to the.
I wouldn't do that. No, I don't think you need to do that. I think you need to try and get a trip up to Lockerbie.
Yeah.
You know, maybe get your parents to. It's only it's a bit of a drive, but it might be worth it. You know, take your camera and your mic and just get some shots around the town and along the motorway. Try and find out where the actual plane came down on the motorway. It might be difficult to know exactly where it is, and you may not be able to get access to it because it is a motorway.
Yeah.
But there might be a bridge you can get, and just show the place. Show the place where it happened, and have your characters tell us what happened.
Okay.
You don't need a presenter. They are the story.
Yeah.
So when you're recording them, you need to ask them the question: can you tell us? You know, explain what you need in terms of them introducing the story. Get them to tell you what happened in 1988 at Lockerbie.
And if you're doing day in the life sort of stuff, then potentially B-roll can be quite boring if you allow it to be. So I would think quite carefully about symbolism. So the playing with their grandchildren is a very symbolic thing to show, because it's kind of showing them as caregivers and parents, and obviously they've lost their child. So that's quite an emotive thing to show, because it's symbolic. Going back to Lockerbie and it being totally different to what you would expect is quite symbolic. to try and think of how to use symbolism to add emotion and power to your shots, which could potentially be a bit dull.
Yeah.
And thoughts gone. Came in and went out. Yeah. On a practical, you talked about, you know, using their voiceover, their narration,
Yeah.
their story over. But I advise you to shoot the interviews on camera
Okay.
with the sound, because you
Yeah.
might kick yourself later if you don't.
Yeah.
Make sure that you get a camera or two in the room, keep it nice and naturalistic, don't intimidate them, ensure they're fine, because they've been interviewed many
Yeah.
times before. But get it on camera, because you can always separate the sound off.
Yeah.
You know, but if you don't, you might regret it.
Yeah. That would give me another audio source as well.
You're not making a radio program,
Yeah.
you're making a documentary.
Yeah.
So shoot everything you can, and then you can edit the sound however you like.
Yeah, and be confident in your style when it comes to interviewing. I come across a lot of student interviews and they haven't been confident enough to get exactly what they want out of that person. And what you want out of that person, which is what we chatted about the other day, or we kind of agreed that this is something that you might want, is for them to step out of their pre-practiced routine that they do on the circuit, around the churches or conferences or whatever. You don't want that because it's polished and everybody's saying that, or people have said it. You want something different. So maybe you tell them that you want them to, I don't know how you word that, but it's got to be more intimate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and very kind of raw.
That's definitely something I want to think about, because most of the documentary are like very factual, and I want it to be like more personal based, more intimate. Like, yeah.
You need to ask. You don't be afraid to. You might want to prepare them for it, but you might just explain to them when you arrive, or I suggest you spend a bit of time with these people before you start filming.
Yeah.
So they get used to you and are comfortable with you if they aren't already. But just let them know that you want, you know, to try and dig into their faith and their reasons for forgiving, and you might ask them some slightly difficult questions.
Yeah.
And just make sure they're happy with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to ask a difficult question. For example, it might not be that difficult, but as Dawn was saying, you need to push. You need to push a little bit, because that's the only time you're going to get something that nobody's got before.
Yeah.
And because they know you and they're willing to help, they might just give you a little bit more themselves. And one question I would ask is, I would, you know, almost confront them. I'd just say, you know, you're not like other people. Most people would want revenge, and they would still be filled with hate and revenge even today. You know, you're not like other people. Why? Don't be afraid to confront them. It's not confronting them in an unpleasant way. But asking a question like that, don't always be nice about it. You know, yes, be polite, but push it a little bit, just because they will respond to that, and they will probably respond really well to that, because they will want their story to be told, and they'll say, well, we'll tell you why we are different, and we prefer to be different because of our faith, because this is our choice, and you'll get interesting things from them.
Yeah.
Don't ask boring
everyday questions.
Yeah, and the way that I have done this in the past, and I think quite a few people do, is give them at the beginning, give them a get out. Yeah. So that if you find the situation uncomfortable, then just ask and we can stop or something. Basically, make it clear that there is a way out for them if it gets too intense. But then that gives you the opportunity to kind of push them a bit more, and they don't feel totally backed into a corner. They'll hopefully go along with it. Yeah, I mean, we can go into this more as it develops, but I think it's a really, really good. One thing I do want to ask you is about audience. So who's watching this?
That's quite a hard one because there could be quite a wide range of people who want to watch it because I think it will probably be for. Well, probably because it's hard to say because it could be people who, because the main question that atheists / Christians is, where's God when bad things happen?
Yeah.
So I think it could be like an answer to that in some ways.
Yeah.
And to people who ask that question, and even Christians ask themselves that.
Uh-huh.
So okay, yeah, I kind of want to look at that sort of idea of it. But I think it could be that, and it's a wide range of audience because the sort of things that happen can influence a lot of people.
Yeah, and if you want to tell a message, you need to think about not preaching to the converted as well. So it's not just for Christians. Maybe you want atheists to watch this. You want me to watch this. I'm an atheist, and you want to encourage thought, and so think about how you can appeal to people. And atheists shut down, I think, when it comes to faith, Christianity. So how can you stop them from shutting down and going, nah, it's about God, I'm not interested.
This is the thing. A lot of people would go, how can you forgive? How can you forgive when that happens? How can you do that? And most people haven't got that capability or ability. You know, it's not about faith ultimately, but in fact, you need to make sure that they don't come across as, forgive the expression, kind of Bible bashing do-gooders. You want these people to be human. I mean, I want to understand, because I'm not of any faith or religion. I've got a spiritual side to me, a human side to me, but I would watch this film, but if it became too religious, because faith isn't necessarily about religion, so you need to get the balance. So you don't want these people to come across as, because people switch off then. They go, okay, don't preach. Don't let your film preach. Let them just express why they made those decisions, as human beings. And explain that to them. Explain that to them the tone of your film, so they understand what you're trying to do. That it isn't about religion, but it is about faith and forgiveness.
And maybe forgiveness is a really, really. And maybe forgiveness cuts through all of that. So it's not about God. It's not about Christianity necessarily. It's about something that spans both of those things: atheism and Christianity.
And here's another question you should ask them. You should ask them this question, which is slightly confrontation. Slightly. Do you think a person who doesn't follow a religion or have a religious faith, are they capable of forgiveness? And you'll get a very interesting answer.
Okay.
It might either be very dodgy or very, very interesting, very human. I suspect it will be the latter. Ask them those questions. Ask them difficult questions, and you'll get very interesting answers from them.
Okay.
Yeah. Great.
Nice one.
Really good.
Good luck with that.
Thank you very much. So that's everybody, isn't it? Is anybody trying to hide in the corner? Josh,
Everybody's
we haven't done yours.
Is that what we do all day? Sit and watch YouTube?